let's get into the, so Kennedy Hall put out a tweet, and the tweet was, when they canonize Pope Francis, will you still believe the process is infallible? So Rob and Jason were discussing this in our group chat, and I didn't say a word, and then I just figured I'd steal the conversation and bring it to you guys. So
this happens quite often, actually.
So what are we required as Catholics to believe about the canonization process?
So what I'm about to show is Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma by Ludwig Ott. It was written, I want to say 30s, 40s, 50s, somewhere around there, maybe a little earlier, but before Vatican II.
Wait, Ott is that recent?
I forget if it's Ott or Denzinger that's more recent. I think Denzinger is more
20th
recent.
century?
Yeah, at least end of late 19th century, beginning 20. Yeah, I mean it's within it's within 100-ish years, right?
Yeah, but, I was thinking. I always thought Ott was like right after Trent. I mean, I don't know anything. I thought it was like right after Trent.
No. Ott died in 85. He was born in 1906. So I think he did this in the 50s. I think he wrote it right before the last Marian Dogma in 58. So I think it's been updated since then with that Marian Dogma. But anyways, so all I'll say about Ott is Ott himself is obviously not infallible. So he can be wrong with this stuff. But what he says is that secondary objects of infallibility are truths of Christian teaching on faith and morals, which aren't formally revealed in either scripture or tradition or in councils or anything like that, but they're closely connected with the teaching of revelation. They're closely connected to primary objects of infallibility. So he basically says that the church cannot achieve the purpose of, preserving and interpreting the deposit of the faith if she could not infallibly decide these doctrines which are intimately linked with those. And some of these secondary objects of infallibility are, well, you can see them here, but the one we're, of course, interested in is the canonization of saints. So Ott says that the final judgment that a member of the church has been assumed into heaven is a secondary object of infallibility. And he says that conclusion is sententia certa, which is more or less theologically certain, which that level of theological note has to be believed on pain of the mortal sin of error. So you're not a heretic if you don't believe it, but you are in the mortal sin of error. This is all according to Ott, and what he's talking about is the fact that someone who is sainted is in heaven. He's not saying that the church says that.
Well, here's what we were saying. So all that is required is what I think it was Susie said it, right? Sally Sue. So all that is required to believe is that the person is in heaven. So the church is infallible in its proclamation in that. Now, the reason this gets iffy is because the canonization process has drastically changed over the past few decades. They no longer have a devil's advocate, and a devil's advocate would rifle through a person's life looking for things to cause scandal to not make this person a saint. Now, the other thing that Francis has kind of skipped over, like with Paul VI, was that second miracle that was needed and things like that.
As well as actually having a true cultus of devotion to
and
that
a
person.
Cult. Exactly. So people don't realize this, but like for most saints, you need to have a cult around that person. So the thing is, the process could be off, right? And the church can err in prudence about whether it's actually good to venerate this part. Like I don't think Paul. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say infallibility. Like people have this misconception that infallibility means that when the church does something infallible, that means it was the best thing that could be done, and that's not true. Infallibility is a negative charism, so all it does is it protects the church from from stating something erroneously.
Erroneous.
So in this case, it protects the church from saying someone who is in hell is in heaven, but it doesn't protect the church from doing something that is stupid or imprudent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like canonizing Paul VI may or may not be smart or prudent at this time. It may be a terrible decision to do in general, but the charism of infallibility does say that they might have been stupid, but they're right. He's in heaven.
So Teresa, to your question, no, we do have to believe that, right? So you can ask for Saint Pope Paul VI intercession. You can. Like, the church has declared him a saint infallibly. But what I would say is there wasn't a cult around him, and I don't think he lived a life worthy of emulating, right? Like that's usually what because there are many saints that aren't canonized. This isn't that, like, being a saint just means that you're beholding the beatific vision and you are with God. Now, the reason the church proclaims certain saints is because they lived a life of extraordinary holiness that they want to set and give us as an example for us to emulate our lives. Look, a saint is basically this. There is something of the divine in their person. Like, there's an aspect of them that you see. There's an aspect of Christ in them, right? Like, there's an aspect of Christ's life that is in them. No saint is completely Christ, but some of them have an aspect of him that is so close to Christ-like that we consider them worthy of veneration. I mean, right? I mean, that's a pretty easy way to explain it.
Yeah. So, Kennedy's tweet, not to agree or disagree with him. This was just kind of a conversation starter.
Yeah, it was just a conversation starter.
Like I don't want to speak for Kennedy, but I would say he probably doesn't have a problem necessarily with believing someone is in heaven if the church says so. I think what he's saying here is that the new process is a lot less stringent, and it is prone to making a lot more prudential error in who we canonize as saints. And the process can change. I mean, the process that was prior to this had been around. There used to be no process. A local bishop could proclaim, a local person a saint, and Ott would still say that is infallible, even though there was really no process. So the process is kind of a moot point, other than it does help us make better prudential decisions as to who really is deserving of general universal devotion.
Yeah. So Teresa's saying so we should ask intercession from those we are sure. So Teresa, what I would say is you should have a favorite saint, like, and you should try to find a saint that maybe touched your life in a very specific way. It could be a new saint, it could be an older saint. It doesn't really matter. You should try to find a saint that you have a particular devotion to because you just feel a kinship with them, or you love something about their life, some aspect of their life, something that makes you feel a connection to that saint. And I would say it doesn't matter where, when that saint was canonized, right? So Mrs. C says most trads in general call him Padre Pio, even those of us that have a devotion to him, it's not a setting, right? Yeah, Lawrence, I call him Padre Pio.
Yeah. That mostly, yeah. I call him Padre Pio because that's what I knew him as prior, right?
Right, but do they consider him a saint? That's all Enoch was getting at. But yeah, I call him Padre Pio too. Now, Padre Pio is one of my favorite saints. I mean, it started with watching that movie Padre Pio Miracle Man, and the actor who played him in that movie did such a great job of him that it caused me to start reading books on him, and then really, and it's not that I've had any miracles in my life by praying to him or anything. I just always felt like I was his spiritual son for some reason, Yeah, a lot of people have this opinion, that's for sure. Paul VI is canonized to canonize the council.
And I feel that's probably true. That's probably the reason it was done.
I agree.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that he's not in heaven.
Yeah, guys, what is required to get to heaven? not dying in a state of mortal sin, right? I mean, then you have to go through purgatory. I mean, you have to go through purgatory, but just, I mean,
Well,
that's,
if you
you know,
think of it,
you
a
assume
pope
that,
got last rites.
yeah,
Probably made a confession. If they weren't able to, like Paul, John JP2 was, I would assume, physically unable to, because he was pretty much incapacitated for a while before his death. But if they're unable to, they're still granted pardon from their sins. They receive viaticum, and then they're given the apostolic pardon. So, and the apostolic pardon would actually get them out of purgatory too. So, and even if they were in purgatory, if a pope has a billion Catholics around the world praying for him after death,
offering sacrifice.
yeah. Once again, I'm not
masses.
saying it's a necessarily a good idea to spread devotion to Paul VI or even JP2 necessarily. I'm just saying I think it's a safe bet they're probably in heaven.
So now, so as far as asking intercession through Lefebvre wouldn't be a thing for SSPX, how can he be declared a saint? So you can still ask for the intercession even of a loved one, because I believe that souls in purgatory can pray for us, but they can't pray for themselves, right? Is that what it is?
I'm not sure on that. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure souls in and you could always pray for someone who's passed. And maybe ask for their intercession, not knowing for sure they're in heaven, but if they're in heaven, please pray for me. Yeah, something like that. So,
and even then, the church has never banned private devotion to.
Yeah, how does a cult start? How does a cult start?
Starts.
A cult starts before the person is canonized.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah. So there's nothing wrong with anyone, praying to Lefebvre or anyone else.
Right. So even look at from Peoria, Illinois, used to Sheen, Archbishop Fulton Sheen, right? People are constantly asking for his intercession because we want to get the canonization process going. There have been miracles through his intercession before he's an actual saint. So, I mean, there's no issue with praying to someone who has passed on, whether you know where they are or not. So, what was the other actual Catholic topic we wanted to get to tonight? There was